hear this rumble in the parking lot and look out, and it's about 10 motorcycles, and there's a knock on the door. Open up the door, and it's Hell's Angel. It says, "I want to meet Willie." Willie comes to the door and starts talking to him. And then Willie goes, "Well, boys, I got to go to the gig." And they say, "Well, come on, we'll take you." So we got off the bus, and I got on the back of one of the guys' bikes, and Willie got on the back of the other.
All right, we are in here for a really special episode of Drifting Cowboy Podcast. I've been so excited for this. Mickey Raphael, thank you for having me out at your beautiful home.
Well, thank you for coming out.
Well, this really has been something that I've been looking forward to for a long time. I think I talked to Elaine back in the summer about doing this, coming over here.
Well, it's funny because she emailed me and said, "Do you want to do this?" And I looked at your podcast and I go, "Well, hell yeah." You know?
Well, I appreciate it. I kind of like to start my podcast off. I do it kind of chronologically. So when did you start playing harmonica, and how'd you kind of get into it?
Well, I started as a kid. A friend of my dad's gave me my first harmonica. And I think I was probably 9 or 10 years old. And he said, "If you can learn to play "Oh Susanna," I think it might have been "The Old Gray Mare," one of these little folk songs, I'll give you the harmonica." And I did, and that was my first harmonica. And, I just kind of always loved music, and I wanted to be a guitar player originally, but I was a terrible guitar player. And I just kept on gravitating back to the harmonica.
Yeah. Well, that was around Dallas, wasn't it?
Yeah, I grew up in Dallas, and this was in the mid-'60s. And then there was the British invasion, with the Stones and John Mayall and all the English bands. And a couple of those guys played harmonica, and that, again, piqued my interest.
Right.
And then Bob Dylan was putting records out in the 60s, and I really got into Dillon and the whole folk scene. So that was really my first musical influences, I think.
Right. Well, there was quite a folk scene going on in Texas, Dallas specifically during those years, wasn't it?
Yeah. You had Michael Murphy. You had Ray Wiley Hubbard.
Yeah.
Was playing. There was a little club called the Rubaiyat in Dallas that had a lot of the folk singers come through there. I met Guy Clark when I was still in high school.
Wow.
And he and Susanna were coming in there playing. Townes Van Zandt.
Wow.
Alan Dameron was one of the guys. But Michael Murphy was, I think, the biggest that came through because he was, to me, he was a big star. He'd already moved to, he was from Dallas, but he'd moved to L.A. and was writing songs for the Monkees.
Yeah.
And then he would come back on his tours and play Texas and always hit, his hometown, Dallas.
Yeah, when you were young and watching those cats, did you ever think, I'll be playing with these guys one day?
No, well, that was what I aspired to, but I was really just going there and listening to the music and just really digging it. And they were generous enough to let me sit in on maybe a song. And Michael Murphy was one of those ones that gave me a chance to play a tune with him. So I kind of learned, basically, trial by fire, just brought me up on stage to play.
Yeah. What was your first paid gig as a musician?
The first paid gig might have been with a guy named Mike Ames. We played, he played flat pick style guitar, like Doc Watson, and jug. He had a microphone stand with a little cradle on it with this clay jug, whiskey jug on it that on the mic stand would be right by his face, and he'd sing and play guitar and blow into the jug. And I played harmonica, and we had a gig at this crazy club in downtown Dallas called The Cellar. And it was a rock club. I mean, ZZ Top got their start there, or I guess it was the American Blues was the name of the band back in the day. And we had a split shift. We played from 8 to 8:30 and 4 to 4:30 a.m. That's where I kind of cut my teeth. I don't think we're making $15 a night or something.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you started playing pretty young for B.W. Stevenson, didn't you?
Yeah, then I was going to a junior college, to El Centro Junior College in Dallas, and I met up with B.W. Stevenson, who was kind of a regular at the Rubaiyat, the club there. So we started playing, and we were playing these. He was writing a lot, and we were playing a lot of the sports bars, where people came, to watch the games. They didn't want to come hear the music, so we're having to fight the, screaming drunks every night. And then he got a record deal and went to Chicago to make his first record, and then went on tour with a van.
Yeah, yeah. Well, for those of you who don't know who B.W. Stevenson is, educate yourself for sure. He wrote My Maria and he was in
Shambhala.
Yeah, some incredible music from B.W. Stevenson. When he went and got his record deal, you wasn't with him anymore, or
No, I was with him on. I played on his first two records.
were you with him up until you went with Willie?
Yeah.
How'd
Yeah.
that happen?
Well, I was touring with BW, and I think he'd had some time off. He took a break, and I'd met Willie in Texas, and Willie said, "Hey, if you hear we're playing anywhere, come sit in." So I did. I started showing up at different joints around Texas, around Dallas. Really was the first place. He was playing in a high school gymnasium for a benefit for a volunteer fire department. So I showed up and played, and we went to a truck stop afterwards and had breakfast. And about 1 a.m, I was getting ready to leave, and I thought I'll have one more cup of coffee. And in that last cup of coffee, Willie says, "Hey, we're going to New York in a couple of months. Why don't you go with us?" And I said, "Sure." And then I saw how he was playing. I'd kind of follow his schedule, and if there was a gig I could get to, drive my car to San Antonio and sit in with him, or
Right.
just hitting some of the spots, and started playing with him regularly on weekends.
And that wasn't a paid gig.
No, it wasn't a paid gig. Actually, the legend has it that Willie asked Paul English, or the drummer, he said, "What are we paying Mickey?" And Paul says, "Well, we're not. He's just sitting in and just coming to play." And Willie says, "Well, double his salary."
So how long did you do that before you ended up getting paid? How long were you doing sit-ins?
Well, I was sitting in for a couple of weeks, and then I don't remember how long, but eventually, by the time we were going to New York, I think I was making $50 a show. I can't remember if it was a weekly. No, I think it was a show. And then eventually we got bumped up to $100 a week.
Yeah.
But I tell people I was never officially hired. I was just never asked to leave.
Well, what was it like in those early days with Willie?
Well, I was this little hippie kid with big hair, long hair, and a beard, and we were playing these pretty rough redneck joints.
Yeah.
So it was tough. I mean, I couldn't walk in there by myself. Paul would walk myself and B. Spears, a bass player, because he had hair past his shoulders, and his hair was really long. And so Paul was always, such a badass and heavily armed, and nobody was going to mess with him. So we'd all wait in our cars in the parking lot till Paul got there, and then we'd all walk in together.
Paul was the escort.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that it was pretty rowdy, rough times.
It was
in
rowdy
Texas.
and rough, and it was the end of the Vietnam War, and hippies and the cowboys didn't really get along. But music was a conduit between these two groups, and everybody, it kind of brought the two groups together.
Yeah, Ray Wally was telling me about the story behind Redneck Mother. Was him going in a bar with long hair and they wanting to fight him and all that. I couldn't imagine, but it does seem like y'all's music brought everybody together during those times.
Yeah, it either I think it's the alcohol that makes you want to fight too. It wasn't because I mean, some of the long hairs that I knew were more redneck than the cowboys I knew.
Right.
So
You just talked about B. Spears, and it reminded me of a story that I'd like you to tell of B flying during Angel flying too close to the ground.
yeah, we were playing in Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas. We were there for a couple of weeks. And after the shows, we'd always go hang out in the bar downstairs. It was a big circular bar. and we'd hang out for a few hours to wind down after the show. And B had met, there were some guys at the bar he was talking to, and he finally came around to finding out what they did. They said they were riggers. They were people that flew. I don't think if it was Mary Martin, but there was a Peter Pan. There was a show in town, and they were flying the Peter Pan character. And B thought for a minute, as he does, and said, "Can you fly me?" And he told him, he was Willie's bass player. We have a song out now called "Angel Flying Too Close to the Ground." So he said, "Sure." So they came backstage, hooked him up with this harness, and unbeknownst to Willie, he didn't tell Willie at all. So Saturday night show sold out at Caesar's Palace, and they put B in this harness that's got little eye hooks on the belt on your waist. So you have to, when they hoist you up, and they hoisted him up on the side of the stage above our heads, and then you have to get your body in a particular position so it's balanced, so you're not upside down.
Right.
And they hoisted him up, and he couldn't get in that position, and he starts tumbling, kind of slow somersault. And then during the song, Angel Flying Too Close to the Ground, Willie's taking a solo, and then they haul on cables. They're pulling B across the stage. He comes all the way across the stage while Willie's still playing, and the audience is going nuts. And Willie's going, "Thank you very much." He doesn't know B is above him, but when B's pulling back or coming back across the stage, he is totally upside down, but has his arms out like he's flying. And finally, Willie looked up and saw B over his head.
That's hilarious. Another funny story that I've heard, I think I read you wrote about, was the Hells Angels showing up and you guys hitching a ride with them.
Yeah, they wanted to meet Willie, and they pulled up. I'm sitting on Willie's bus in, I think it was outside of San Jose or Santa Clara, California. And we heard this low rumble in the parking lot and look out, and it's about 10 motorcycles, and there's a knock on the door. Open up the door, and it's Hell's Angels. Says, "I want to meet Willie." I said, "Well, okay." Or Willie comes to the door, I think, to meet him and starts talking to him, and they chat for a little bit. And I guess Willie signed some autographs. And then Willie goes, "Well, boys, I got to go. I got to go to the gig." And they say, "Well, come on, we'll take you." So we got off the bus, and I got on the back of one of the guys' bikes, and Willie got on the back of the other. And we rode down the 405, I can't remember on the 405 or Highway 1, the 405, I think, to the venue, about 20 minutes, And I'd never done anything like that before. And this guy I was with was so big, I could have lit a cigarette behind, sitting behind him. He was blocking the wind so well. He was a big boy.
No hesitation at all.
Well, I figured if I'm ever going to ride a motorcycle, this is the place to do it. This is the time to do it. And so and this was just thunderous noise going down the highway, in formation. It felt, it could have been, 10 F-16s or something, F-18s. So we go to the racetrack we're playing and pull up to the backstage entrance. And the security guy stops us, says, "You can't come in here. It's like 10 Hells Angels, and they're wearing their colors, and it's obvious who they are." And the front bike pulls up and says, "This is Willie Nelson." And the cop goes, "Sure it is." And then Willie had to pull out his American Express card to prove who he was before they let him in.
They were probably thinking, "What in the world is Willie Nelson doing pulling up with the Hells Angels?"
Yeah.
That's so cool, though, because Willie's just, all of y'all are free-spirited people, and you hear those stories. I guess times were different back then, but y'all just lived life and had some of the best times and stories in country music history.
I guess so. And I didn't know if we were that, we weren't really mainstream country. So it was, we were just doing what Willie does. He's just, that's the way he lives, if he was a country singer or not.
Yeah. Well, when Ray Wiley come on, he was telling a story, and I want to ask if you were a part of it or heard any stories from it of when Pootie Locke and Paul
They
kidnapped
kidnapped
him.
him, yeah.
Were you around for any of that?
Yeah, I was on the bus. We only had one bus at the time, so I think he was just going to go for a day trip, but it ended up in Chicago or wherever we were going.
Yeah, he said he had to get off the bus because it was too crazy. So he went on Jerry Jeff's bus. I said, was that any less crazy? He said, no, not at all.
Yeah, I remember one time we fell asleep on the bus, and this bus was not set up very well for a band. It had a big lounge with a couple of doors leading into it, and we'd all fallen asleep, and B had gaffer taped the doors shut. For what reason, I don't know, other than when we got up, nobody could get out.
Well, you worked with so many people over the years, and you mentioned earlier meeting guys like Guy Clark and Townes Van Zandt. You were on some of Guy's records, right?
Mm-hmm. I was on his old number one, and two or three of the early records.
Wow. What was he like to work with?
He was great. He was such a prolific writer. I
Yeah.
still listen to him, and I'm amazed by his use of the English language.
Yeah, his
and he was
lyricism.
fun to play with too. I got to do a couple of gigs with him, and then that's where I met Rodney
yeah.
Crowell. So that was like a little, I don't want to say clique, but that was the group that was in Nashville. And then Rodney moved to L.A., and I moved to L.A. When Rodney was out there. Or I went out there to stay with Rodney and work on Emmylou Harris' record. He was playing in her band. Then I ended up moving out.
Yeah, you stayed out there and worked with Emmy for a while, didn't you? On a few
Several
records.
yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible work. I love Rodney Crowell. But like you said, that whole group, it was Guy and Townes and Steve Earle and Rodney. Bunch of Texas guys.
A bunch of Texas guys that I didn't really meet till later,
Yeah, it seems like I guess there was just something in the water in Texas in the '60s, because there's so much great talent came out of Texas during those years. And then you was on which Townes album was you on?
At My Window.
At My Window,
yeah.
right? Did you ever do anything else with him, or was it just that record?
No, I think I might have played with him live a few times. But as far as recording goes, I think that was the only record that I played on.
How was he?
He was great. He was just the sweetest guy in the world.
Do you talk about coming up in the '70s and Austin during those times, and Willie really busting open that scene down there? You can't help but think about Willie's picnics, and how did all that get started?
Well, there was a Dripping Springs picnic in '72 that Willie played. I didn't play it; I wasn't around then, and so I'm not sure who played it. It was in Dripping Springs in this field,
Yeah,
this cow pasture. And so the next year, Willie thought, "Well, I can do this. I mean, how hard is it to put together one of these shows?" So he invited a bunch of his friends, being Leon Russell and Doug Somm and Jerry Jeff and everybody on the planet that he knew, and in the same location. It was the first Dripping Springs reunion. So that was 4th of July on 3rd or 4th of July on I guess it was the 4th, 1973.
yeah.
And that started the tradition of doing these 4th of July shows.
And they were pretty rowdy. I've watched all the videos that are available online of some of those early shows. One of my favorite ones being Leon Russell and Willie and Waylon and Doug Kershaw doing Jambalaya. And it just looks like the best. I tell people, if I could go back in time and go to any concert, it'd have been the '74 picnic, because that just looked like one of the greatest concerts of all time.
That was crazy.
What's it like to be a part of shows like that?
Just chaos, just... In 1976, he did one in Gonzales, Texas. Now, there was no infrastructure for a show. There were no hotels nearby. It just a bunch of Winnebagos. And we went out to, the band went out, and I guess they thought it'd be one night. Well, there were so many people showed up and so many bands that just wanted to play. It was for 3 days. We didn't have any hotels, so I found somebody that had, a place to crash in a Winnebago and hung out, and we never even got on stage because of Willie just kept letting people play, and he would sit in with them, but he never did a show. He never played with the band. That was 1976. I still have a picture of that.
Well, was the first album that you did with Willie Redheaded Stranger?
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah, he was. I was in the band, and I just started in the band, and he was going to headed to Muscle Shoals to do Phases and Stages, and after that, he got a new record deal, or he signed with Columbia, and the deal was that he could use his band, which is pretty unique.
Yeah.
Back at that time, and he came back from Colorado from a road trip with Connie, his wife at the time, and had a stack of napkins and papers and stuff with this idea for a record. He called it a concept record, and that was Redheaded Stranger. So I was living in Dallas, or I was from Dallas, so I knew the recording studios there, and he said, find us a place we can go in the studio and record. And I found this studio I'd been working at called Autumn Sound, and in a couple of days we put down Redheaded Stranger.
Wow.
Which was just him really sitting by himself, or sitting, on a stool or a chair, whatever, and then me and B and Jody set up around him, and Bobby kind of on the corner of the studio, and Paul in the drum booth, and Willie would just play his guitar and teach us the songs as we're going along, and we were just, the tape machine was rolling. So that record was done in 2 or 3 takes, and it's so sparse because we're hearing the songs for the first time.
That's crazy, because it really is one of the greatest country albums of all time. And what's even crazier is Columbia, they didn't believe in it, and
they thought it was a good demo, but they wanted him to come back and do a produced record.
They wanted him to do it with Billy Sherrill, didn't they? They wanted to put strings on it and stuff.
Well, yeah, I don't think Billy was going to produce him, but they wanted it a little more produced,
Yeah, I saw an interview with Billy, and he was saying that one of his greatest regrets was that he didn't believe in that album.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
I'll send it to you, but it's an interview. He's older, and they asked him if there's anything he regrets, and he said, "Yeah, that album, I just didn't see it at the time. At the time, I didn't see the vision, but I wish I'd have believed more in that album. He should have, because it is an incredible album. It's probably in my top 3 all time ever albums, and I think it's in a lot of people's all time.
Yeah, mine too. I had fun with some recordings of his because I love the stuff he did in the 60s, all the RCA recordings.
Oh, yeah.
And so I got a hold of the master tapes and stripped them down, took all the strings and the background voices off the songs, and just left Willie and the core band. And we call it Naked Willie. It was like what the Beatles did with Let It Be.
Yeah.
We let it be naked. So this was Naked Willie is what it came out at. And it was, one of those records that had a lot of sweetening, a lot of orchestration. And we just removed all that. And it's just, Willie and great studio cats here.
Well, I think when people think about Willie today, it's just this larger than life character, which he is. But back then, when he went to Austin, or at least from what I read, it was a lot of playing small venues. He wasn't the massive star that he is today. At least he had it was more of a cult following, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, definitely we weren't mainstream.
Yeah.
But he was loved in Texas and was, just had a great following, a very loyal following. But we were playing... For the first several years, we were playing, like little clubs and stuff.
Right.
I remember the Rolling Stones offered him the opening spot for their world tour in '75, and he turned it down. And I was just heartbroken. It's like, why don't you want to do this? And he goes, well, why be an opening act, when we can stay in Texas, go home every night, and be king of the hill,
Yeah. Was it the Redheaded Stranger album? Was that kind of what pushed y'all into that mainstream?
I think so. Redheaded Stranger album. Then he started doing movies, Honeysuckle Rose, and just sticking around, playing around Austin.
Waylon,
4th of July picnics,
Waylon had a big part in getting Columbia put out Redheaded Stranger, didn't he?
I'm not sure. I don't know that story, but Waylon was pretty established,
Yeah.
in Nashville. But Willie had already left Nashville and was kind of done with it.
From what I've heard, they were gonna, shelf the album or whatever because they thought, like you said, it was a good demo album. And Waylon told them, "This is Willie Nelson. This is Willie. Y'all need to put this out." And he was kind of a driving force in getting them to do that. And then, of course, I guess Willie got Waylon to come down to Texas, and the scene really blew up then. What was it like being a part of that? The whole outlaw movement.
Well, it was cool. I mean, but it couldn't happen fast enough for me. I was just kind of trying to inch Willie along, push him a little bit to play some of the more rock shows. I mean, Waylon was on tour with the Dead.
Yeah.
And then Willie had turned down the Stones and was happy just playing, dances in some of these country bars. So I knew that he was going to I felt that he was going to be more mainstream and, crossover, but it couldn't happen fast enough for me.
Yeah.
Willie just kind of took his time and let people come to him. He wasn't really out searching for popularity or anything. He just did what he did, and the crowds finally, discovered him.
I think that just speaks volumes of Willie, though, because when we had Jamie on, he described Willie as being the perfect country music fan because he loves the music over anything. He just loves country music. And him turning down the Stones because we can play in Texas to our people, that says a lot about him. But seeing him go from that, then he puts out Redheaded Stranger, and he's one of the biggest stars in country music. That had to be incredible for y'all.
Yeah, I think it came a little later after. It took a while for Redheaded Stranger still to catch on. But yeah, it got big after that. We were playing arenas.
Well, how did the whole movie stuff come to be?
I think somebody wrote a script, had a script about a country singer and his band. And I think they pitched it to him, or I'm not sure how the connection was actually made.
Was that the songwriter?
No, Honeysuckle Rose.
Honeysuckle Rose.
Yeah, but Willie was friends with Gary Busey, and who was an actor, a musician and actor. And that little group was Gary Busey, Jan Michael Vincent, Jimmy Wyatt, who was a big agent at ICM. And, Jan was a big TV star and movie star at the time. So they and they were hanging with Willie, so they brought Willie around, and some of the actors or the agents that were a little hipper than others, knew who Willie was, and they just saw, this talent.
Yeah.
And I think these guys kind of brought Willie into that world.
And you were in a couple of those movies, wasn't you? It was right around the turn of the 70s into the 80s that y'all did Stardust, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. It's been like 10 years on the Billboard,
No, it's still on the charts, I think.
Yeah. It's incredible. That album just keeps going. And can you tell us a little bit?
It was just the American Songbook. I mean, everybody knows those songs, and your parents know those songs, and it was just kind of in everybody's DNA. So even though that they're not country songs, but they're good songs.
It wasn't long after that the Highwaymen, came to be and got put together. Did you ever tour out on the road with them?
Oh, yeah. I did all their tours.
How was that?
That was great. I mean, to be able to play with, Willie, of course, but Waylon and Johnny Cash and Christopherson. And then the band was with the guys that played on the record, too. Everybody that was on stage had played on the record.
Yeah.
And that was, great studio cats, and they'd made records with Percy Sledge and with Elvis. They were the band that did Elvis, the Memphis album, so In the Ghetto and The Suspicious Minds. It was those guys that played. Reggie Young and Bobby Wood, Bobby Emmons, Gene Chrisman.
Yeah.
J.R. Cobb and Robbie Turner. So it was fun playing with those guys. I mean, I thought the sound checks were the most fun because we would play, for an hour, just jam with the guys. Yeah,
that had to be really interesting to be on the road with four of the biggest legends to ever do it. Mm-hmm. You got any stories from those days?
Well, a couple of times Johnny invited me to have dinner with him in his hotel suite after the shows. He had a chef that traveled with him, and he and June would have dinner, and they'd invite me. And I was very intimidated by him. He was just, so massive, but he was just the sweetest guy on the planet, and tried not to be intimidating.
Yeah.
A couple of times I remember in Australia, we spent time together. So, and I always loved playing with Waylon. That was one of my favorite experiences playing. His music really lent itself to the harmonica.
Oh yeah. Well, who were some of your influences on harmonica?
Of course, Charlie McCoy, who's played on every country record. A guy from Dallas named Donnie Brooks, who played with Waylon actually in the 70s. That's how I got turned on to Waylon, I think.
Yeah.
It was through Donnie. He was from Dallas. And he was the first guy I met him at the club, the Rubaiyat, and he sat me down and taught me a little bit of how the notes were laid out on the harmonica. Just wrote a pattern out on a napkin. And that's kind of the basics for everything I
When you met him, who was he playing for then, or was he playing for anybody?
He was playing with a guy, the little folk club. He was playing with a guy named Johnny Vanderveer, who was a singer-songwriter.
That's cool that y'all knew each other and then both ended up playing for Willie and Waylon.
Yeah, he played with Waylon, and then I thought when I met Willie, because I guess Waylon really opened the door to travel. Nobody was touring with a harmonica player, And about the time I went to work for Willie, Donnie was just leaving Waylon. He didn't want to tour anymore. So we're out with Willie for a couple of months, and then Willie decides to take the summer off. And I asked him, I said, hey, would you call Waylon and get me a gig with Waylon? And so I went out for a summer, the first summer of 73 with Waylon.
Was it a lot different touring with Waylon in those days than it was with Willie, or was it kind of
Well, Waylon was playing a little bigger places. I think he was a little bigger than Willie at the time because he wanted to get out of Texas, and Willie didn't really.
Yeah.
And Willie didn't have a bus. Waylon had that black Bluebird bus. And I remember, it just, the music, the harmonica just fit with his music.
Yeah.
So good, so well.
What year was that?
I think it was 73. It was the first year I started with Willie.
That's pretty close to the time that he did that Billy Joe Shaver Honky Tonk Heroes album.
I think that had already been done. Yeah, because Donnie Brooks played on that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's some great harmonica in that album.
That's who taught me to play.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Honky Tonk Heroes and Lonesome on Marie Mean. There's harmonica. Donnie's on it. Old Five. No, what is it? Old Five. What's the
Old Five and Nimers?
Was that in title of a record or just a song? I can't. There
That-
were two
that was one of
songs.
the-
There's Billy Joe Shaver. Oh, This Time.
Yeah.
Is there an album called This Time?
Yeah, there's This Time, yeah. Yeah, there's some great harmonica on that record. And now that you say that, I'd have probably guessed that it was you playing the harmonica
Yeah,
on
well,
those
I stole
albums.
a lot
Yeah.
from Donnie, or he was one of my biggest influences. I mean, those two records were the best with Waylon.
It's interesting how, on different instruments, guitar, harmonica, and stuff, everybody has their own style. And with harmonica, you would think that'd be harder to do, but really, you can separate Charlie McCoy from a Mickey. How do you go about creating your own style with a harmonica?
I don't know. Everybody's unique on that. It's just you have a unique tone that just could be how you breathe through it. How your lungs process the air.
Yeah.
And my tone is not like anybody else's.
Right. Charlie does, which I'm sure you've heard it a million times. I heard that Lonesome Whistle Blow, the Hank Williams, and he does the recitation at the end. Man, I get chills every time I hear it. I got to hear him do it live at the Opry a while back, and he's just so incredible.
Yeah, he's amazing.
And your album, Hand to Mouth, and then you had the, what was it, the Red River Valley?
Yeah, that was something I did that really wasn't my record. That was something that Cracker Barrel had hired me and all put a band together and wanted these songs done. So
I see. But the Hand to Mouth record that you did is incredible.
well, thanks.
So if any of you who are listening have not seen that or listened to that record, go check it out because there's some incredible music on that. Are you Are you ever going to do any more solo?
Yeah, I'm
work
working
that?
on another. I've got like an EP. I've got about 5 songs cut that I did with the guys from this band Calexico.
Okay.
That's that we just finishing up now.
Yeah. Well, you talked earlier about going over to California and doing work with Rodney Crowell and Emmylou Harris, obviously. And one of my favorite songs of all time is "Till I Gain Control Again," and Willie's version is so great. Did Rodney and Willie know each other previously?
No, I brought Rodney around.
Did you? And y'all just cut an entire Rodney Crowell
Right.
album recently, which is incredible. He's such a great writer, and from that
Great
same
singer
group.
too.
Yeah, and you're on the road with Chris Stapleton a lot now too, right?
I am. When Willie's not working, I'll go out with Chris.
Yeah, and he does a lot of weekend shows and stuff.
Just weekends, yeah, which makes it great. You get to spend a little time at home.
You did a solo show kind of deal a while back, didn't you? Here in Nashville.
I did a show, at the Brooklyn Bowl. It was scary. Scariest thing I've ever done. Yeah, I was out of my comfort zone, but I had some real great help. I used Chris's band, the Honchos, who I've played with for many years now, 10 years, and we brought in some ringers. I called some friends, had Shelby Lynn and Billy Gibbons and Jason Isbell and Amos Lee, and did I say Shelby Lynn already? And T-Bone Burnett.
Yeah.
And Bill Evans, who is a sax player, a friend of mine who played with Miles Davis in the 80s. So, and Waylon Payne, who tours with us now. So everybody sang a few songs, and we just had a good time.
Yeah, Waylon's Jody's son, right? He plays guitar, which I did for a while.
Yeah, he's still playing, singing, and playing guitar.
Oh, another person that you got to play with that we hadn't discussed is Bob Dillon.
Oh, yeah.
And coming from a folk background, I know that must have been pretty incredible for you.
Yeah, it was. It was a highlight of my musical career.
Yeah, I could imagine. Well, what's coming down the road for you?
We've got I've got a song that's coming out. I played on a track with the Avett Brothers.
Oh, yeah.
And Mike, Mike Patton from Faith No More. They did a joint project, and that's coming out like any day now. And then I've got a Willie doing Merle songs, a Willie tribute, a Merle tribute that I co-produced with Willie, and just a few dates with Chris this year. One more date with Willie, and then then I may do another solo gig at the Analog that PBS will film.
Oh, that'll be incredible.
So we're trying to put something together now for that
in
December.
That'll be really great.
Things are pretty quiet.
And Willie, just like we talked about off camera, he just keeps on going.
Yeah, he loves to play, so the shows are late. We don't go on till almost 10 o'clock at night, but he just waking up about that time.
Do you think you'll be like that? Do you think you're just going to keep on playing until you can't?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd work as much as Willie. I don't like staying on the road for 2 weeks at a time.
Yeah.
You know, I'm over that.
Yeah.
I don't love the road.
Yeah.
But I love playing with Willie. So when he decides to stop, I'm not doing I don't think I want to do any more long tours.
Yeah.
I don't sleep well on the bus anymore, and just, and we get into a town and you're up at 7 o'clock because the bus drops you off at the hotel, and then you got to go to the gig. It
can be tough.
I mean, it can be worse, but I'm just I've done it, so I'm ready for a little bit of a break. But I'll still play music,
Right.
I'll still, I'll still play. I'm just glad that the touring has slowed down a little bit.
Yeah. Do you do quite a bit of session work?
Not quite a bit, but some fun stuff. I'm able to do. And I started writing again, so I've got 3 songs that Willie cut recently.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, I tell you, Mickey, I just so appreciate getting to come here and sit down with you. And you're a country music legend, so it's been just a joy to be here and hear the stories and sit down with you and talk about the music.
Well, thank you very much. Well, you know more about it than I do. So, and you piqued my memory on some things too. So it's.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. And anytime I can help you with anything, I hope to be able to come see one of those solo shows one day, because I'm just a fan.
Yeah, I'll let you know. That'd
Yes,
be
sir.
great.
Please do that, please. But we appreciate you for doing this, inviting us out to your beautiful home here.
Well,
And,
thank you very much.
And we'll catch you next time.
Okay, thank you.